it's Guido coming at you with a tank review. Haven't done one of these for quite a while, actually, and not the full-blown effort. This is the Squall. We're going to start with this one because it's the light, and because it's one of the first ones I got to 10 battles with. And I also want to start on a positive note because it's the one I did the worst in. I don't want to do the one that I did well in, which is the XM57, and then come to this one and blast it. We're not going to blast it because it's actually a good tank if you are very good, or if you play it very well. Those are sometimes the same thing, not necessarily. You can be a medium player and have a really great game in a tank that has a very high upside like the Squall. Long story short, get the Squall to the late game with a significant amount of hit points and it's a monster. Like all of your autoloader, loader, reloaders, and the other Czech light tanks with the autocannon mechanic. There's the rub, because it ain't easy. And being effective early is going to require a lot of brain power. This is a brain power tank. This is not a Mongo tank. I Mongoed it a little bit. I also tried to play it more as a pure scout, more as a pure scout. So a couple mistakes were made. All right, fellas. I ended up with 2 wins and 8 losses. Let's just put it that way. But I did put 10 battles into it. So let's talk about it. I think I have some good advice for you along the way. Some things certainly to do, not do. I'll show you my best game, which is solidly below average. And we'll give you a couple warnings about things to watch out for with the Squall. You can see it here in the garage. As I noted, it is a Czech light tank. This is the premium light tank that was missing when the Czech light tank line came out, and everyone went, where is it? Usually that happens right before. It lets people sort of practice. I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but let's be one anyway. If I was to craft a conspiracy around it, they sort of knew it was kind of bland or maybe difficult to play. So they didn't want to color, I guess, or affect the rollout of the whole line with a kind of subpar, at least in terms of performance overall, of the Squall. When I say that, once again, we'll go over this a couple times, but I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad tank. If you are good, you're probably doing really well in it at times. If you are very, very good, you're probably wrecking face in it. All right, I'm good, so I know I can do well at it at times. I just haven't managed that, but we learned a few things as we go. So that's my theory crafting, or my idea on why maybe this thing didn't come out, or it could have just not been ready. It was the plan all along. Who knows? This I was going to say summer. This winter event, the 2024 holiday ops, they put 5 brand new tanks out, which is unusual. We'll talk about that in another video at some point. I thought that was interesting, but this is one of the 5 right here. So maybe that was their plan, and they just needed another tank. So the Czech line was soon enough they put it out. All right, enough of that garbage. Here it is in the garage. You can see it's kind of massive. We're going to compare it against the Blesk. Watch how we shrink. Whoop. Even the Blesk is large, though, fellas. It's large. And I have 2 marked the Blesk in 100 battles. Did decently in it. Liked it quite a bit. But watch this. Squall. Whoop. Oh, gosh. Blesk. And the Blesk is big. Remember we talked about the Selma being big? Selma. Squall. Selma. Squall. Oh, boy. The Squall is like a Selma-sized thing, and I had trouble with the Selma. Ended 52% on that. Noted it's a tier 9. Interesting. So the Squall is more on the Selma level of a combat light tank that can flex to light tank stuff. Coffee is nice. How do I have the Squall set up? Let's go over that real quick. Obviously, the crew is very good. This is a crew. I think it's actually my Tessac crew. It might be my Selma crew. How do I find that out? Where is it? Someone help me. Yes, that's my Tessac crew. I moved several crews up through this line. I have really good crews for the Tessac, and I think even for the Selma. I don't believe it's... Yes, okay, it's the same. So, starting with the Skoda, which is the tier 7, talking to myself as I'm talking to you, it's the same crew out. It's the same crew out. Same crew loadout. A commander that's also your radio operator, a gunner that's also your loader, and a driver. And it's the same. So that's nice all the way through the tech tree, which means then if you are a fan of the Czech light tanks, your Squall is going to train all those crews no problem. From tier 7 on up, you're going to have a ball. There's going to be no shenanigans with retraining crews and all that good stuff, so that's good news. So I had a good crew, as you can see. They're working on their 6 skill. I ran CVS, Optics, LNES so far on the Squall. Like I said, I start off, and I almost do this with all the light tanks, to be honest, and sometimes it bites me. on a tank like this. I just go pure scout setup because I want to see how it can do in that role. All right, it can do it. You got to be careful, but probably not the best setup. If you want to set a pure scout setup, go ahead and do that. Other guys have suggested putting vents in for the optics. All right, the better the vents, the better. So if you're bounty or improved or whatever, you can throw that in there. That's a slot I think you could trade off potentially right there. You might drop the LNES if you're really not going to worry too much about stealth and you're just doing vision games as far as sitting at the edge of the vision circle, things like that. And then, of course, a combat setup would be something like Vert Stab, the turbo, the experimental turbo that gives you some gun handling in there, and vents. And then that would maximize the ability to reload, get your shots on target, all that good stuff. And obviously bounty and above type of stuff is always going to be better than not. But probably a really good tank actually for the experimental turbo. I caution you with a lot of that. I have a bunch of experimental stuff, and the bummer with that is how much parts it takes to remove them. That is such a pain. So be careful with that as you're moving your experimental stuff around. The good news on that is Wargaming has now sort of opened up the floodgates, and we're getting a lot of experimental equipment and pieces and things like that. So that's good through events, etc. With the Squall, I was running 900. I have 300 APCR. I don't know if you really need it that much, but here's the rub on this one as well. This tank's damage is much better than the Blesk. It's got fewer shells per clip, but it does 8 with a standard shell and 6, and 16 with an HE. That's pretty rough, man. Whereas with the Blesk, you're running much smaller damage amounts with each shell at 6, 4, and 12. So there may be a larger argument for the Squall, especially if you're considering yourself as more a offensive type of guy, of running some APCR in case you want to try to chew through a little bit thicker armor right there. I didn't really note the pens, but let's go back to that. We've got 220 standard, wrong place, 182 standard, 236, and a nice 50 pen. Not bad actually for such a little shell. For the high explosive. That means these tanks eat each other alive with the HE. You've seen it several times probably by now. A couple of these Czech tanks, light tanks showing up early in the game, seeing each other and just absolutely deleting the hit points as they go. I ran 2 kits and I'm running food on this. I think food is kind of mandatory on a tank like this, to be quite honest. So that's what we got out of it. Now let's take a quick comparison here. And what I've done is I've got the Squall, I've got the Blesk, and I've got the even 90, which is your pure scout kind of idea, although it does have firepower with its little auto gun. But really probably the class of the class, right? All right, Squall Blesk. 8.6 on the average damage. We just went through the damage. It's getting a little bit more pen on its standard round right there, a little bit more damage per second. The rate of fire has to do with how many shells it kicks out. I think it's 100, it might be 150, 200. We'll look at it later. Continuous fire, whatever that means, I don't know. It's less, though, than the Blesk. Remember, the Blesk has so many little shells coming out there. Reload is exactly the same, fellas. It's about 20. With my setup, we go back here just to give you a general idea. With Brothers in Arms and all the things that I've got, I have my reload down to something which cannot be found. Why is it not there? Reload, there it is. It's hard to see. 17.95. So I shaved, what, a second off of it or so? That seems less than I would have thought, huh? Is that right? A second off of it. Almost 2. Second and a half, let's put it that way. About a second and a half, something around there. So the vents is going to help you with that and get you back reloaded, back in the fight, as opposed to running around with the optics or one of the other things. Another benefit of the vents. Only -6 on the gun depression on the Squall. That caught me a little bit by surprise. It makes it a little bit funky to use, and that's a tank you're going to try to hide with a lot and try to not expose, so -6 will make you fight the terrain a little bit. Aiming time's okay, up 2.11, better than the Blesk right there. I didn't find it to be too terrible. Also, its bloom was not as bad, I thought, as the Blesk, just as anecdotally. And its dispersion is better at 0.38. In fact, I got mine down to, with this setup, 0.36. So combat, vert, stab, all that stuff won't immediately bring the dispersion down, but it will help you with keeping the dispersion, hold, traverse, turret movement, shooting, all that kind of stuff. So kind of interesting on that one. Swing down here a little bit more. It comes up with a little bit less DPM. This is a number that's sort of hard to wrap your mind around with these types of tanks. That's assuming you get the whole clip off and hit them with all of them and all that kind of stuff, and an average damage thing. So it's just not a tank that does that kind of gameplay. Hit points a little bit more, so you have a little bit more staying power than the Blesk. It's a bit larger. Oh, look at this. Look how much better armored it is than these two. It doesn't have any. 20 and 30. So those HE shells at 50 pen, boom, they're going through, fellas. Weight load limit, pretty good as far as having some good acceleration, 570, so it's got a bigger engine than the Blesk, although it is a much heavier tank. Specific power at 27, so a little bit less. Only 55 and 21 backwards, so 55 top, and I found it to be kind of sluggish, to be quite honest, overall. Even the Blesk is sluggish at 60, and the Blesk does show better specific, was that right? Yeah, it does. So honestly, I thought the Squall was a little bit more sprightly than the Blesk, but these numbers don't show that. There's also the road and terrain resistance and things like that, so that anecdotal feeling from me. Neither of these two is particularly nimble. They're decently fast and they're okay on hull traverse, but just the overall package feels at times a little bit sluggish. Spotting at 380, probably below my icon right there. That's all three of these guys. And the camo's okay. The camo's exactly the same as the Blesk, which is weird. I don't know. The shooting is a little bit worse for the Squall, but the overall 18.24 on stationary moving is exactly the same between the Blesk and the Squall, which is bizarre. And then you've got the 38 from the stationary vehicle. The even did my configuration change back? No, it didn't. Okay, there you go. So that, you know, I didn't look at a lot of the even 90 numbers, but the big one is the stationary vehicle thing. This thing is just stealthier by miles and miles than these two, right? So these are not your maximum stealthy tanks like the even 90 is. They're good, way better than a medium, right? Which sometimes they play like, right? But they're not at 38.8 like the ELC even 90 is. Not a bad package. It's kind of a gun carrier, but with a funky gun with a weird game mechanic. Not weird. I don't know. Weird's maybe not the right word. It's weird for World of Tanks, right? It is definitely a new game mechanic. So when I say weird, it just means that you've got to pay attention. You got to keep your tank in the game to the mid, preferably late game. Manage your clip correctly. Make your moves and your exposures when you can maximize the damage from the clip, but also be willing to bail out and not stand in and try to put all the shots down range, because it does take a while to get them all out. I have eaten a lot of shots sitting there thinking I'm King Kong. Back out, look down at the damage marker, and you've done 250, and you took 600 from 2 shots coming back your way. And you sat there shooting for a while, right? The misses, the bounces, the low alpha on the shots that go in, etc. So you need to be close to your work if you can. You need to be very careful about how you expose and make your moves, and you got to preserve your hit points to the end of the game to be highly effective. And as I've said several times, that's the trick, because getting there is easier said than done, and especially in a very light-skinned tank, and you don't always get to play on an open map, and your teams are not always controlling the terrain and the vision and keeping you out of danger. All right, how is this thing doing overall, though? Let's take a look at it here. This shows an interesting story, guys. These are the light tanks. The Squall is, what, 5th, 6th or so? It is being played by one of the higher win rate groups of people at the moment, the early adopters. There's probably still some vestiges of the CCs that were playing it before it was released, shading those numbers a little bit. As I said, its win rate is 5th or so, 5th or 6th. But this is the one I want to key in on. Minus 2.3 win rate differential between the player's win rate and what you're getting out of it. I helped that number considerably with my... Although I don't know how they do the math, whether they make a player play X number of games before they put their stats in there, or if it's just a big stat dump, or how they do all that. But yeah, I'm not helping that in any way. DPG 776 and assist at 515 as an average, and a 15% survival. Woohoo! That is low. How did I do? Well, as I said, 20% win rate, not great. Not great at all. But there's a story to be told there as well, because I'm not that far off the Blesk. So, Some of those games were my fault, obviously. A couple of them were just team complete rollovers that I was not able to affect in any way, shape, or form, or even not do well enough. Probably a couple of them were influenceable by me. I just failed to do so based on the way I was playing the Squall. I think I've called this thing the Blesk multiple times. I apologize for that. We are reviewing the Squall, not the Blesk. But here it is, 20%, 10 games, 59.69 hit rate. We're going to compare it to the Blesk, whereas with the Blesk I'm at 56, so a little bit higher win rate or hit rate. Only 0.79 and 0.44 on the damage and destruction. That's not good. Armor use none, 0.01. I guess I luckily bounced a couple shells off of the cannon once or twice. Average experience of 532 is extremely low, but of course I'm only at 20% win rate, so the wins bring more experience, base experience, so that's not a very big surprise. Here's the numbers to key in on though. I'm at 823 damage average and 751 assist, whereas the Blesk is 962 and 853. So I'm not too far off the Blesk's number. What I need to do is survive more because I'm sitting at 10, whereas my Blesk was, or the Blesk, I was sitting at 36. So there's your problem, right? You die in a game, you don't have any influence later on. That's pretty simple. Plus I need to increase the damage a bit. The assist is decent, at least for me. So I'm ahead of the ball game for the averages right there, but I'm not surviving, so I'm not influencing wins, so I'm sitting at 20% win rate. And I had a whole massive 1,860 damage game, which you can't see because it's behind me. And once I killed 2 guys. This one time at band camp, I was good at that stuff. Anyway, so there you go. We're going to take a look at some gameplay. We'll talk about it. I'll show you a couple cautionary tales as well, things to watch out for with the Blesk, although one of them in particular is not massive amount of stuff you can do, although there's a skill we'll talk about when I have poo-pooed, which maybe I might rethink. All right, let's take a look at some gameplay. All right, first example is a bit of a cautionary tale. We're going to talk a little bit about tactics with the tank. You can see that we're here. I'm not going to give you the whole preliminary. I've got a whole 940 hit points of damage right here. We're on Himmel's Tundradorf. I took the hill. I took the hill. I got it. Yay. You can see what good it did us, right? Struggled to find any damage on the hill. We held it for now. The rest of the team lost. I'm top tier guy. I have a whole 940 hit points, so I've had a struggle getting this tank into the game. See the 130 coming in here. He gets thumped hard. I'm not reloaded yet. We're going to back around here very slowly. We're going to try to help the RHM if we can. There we go. All right, great. So one of those things that this tank excels at. I hit C, unfortunately. Did not realize that the T-29 was going to show up at the same time, and now I'm on the move. All right, swing around this way. There we go. I thought I was making the move that cost me in just a minute, but let's see what happens. We got the RHM sitting there. Come take a peek. All right, found the 3002. We can't quite get a shot. There's this guy. Oh, gun depression. Could have shut him down. Did not want to lean over too much and either slide off and get shot by him, or that. Okay, the GW has hit me, I think, at least once in this game. Okay, we're going to reload just about in time. There's that relatively fast clip reload. We're going to come down here. He hits me. All right, boom. 44 hit points. There's a bit of luck, fellas. I'm glad that HE shell did not penetrate me right there. All right, so that's where I was last spotted. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005, 1006, 1007, 1000, 1636. Roughly 10 seconds, right, depending on skills, etc., on being spotted or remaining spotted after you were spotted. In that game, I felt I was unlit for a very long time, but as you can see while I was counting, I was probably either still lit or very close to have just gone dark. This thing is vulnerable to HE. Where did he hit me? I didn't look close enough to see if he actually thumped me or splashed, but either way, I took a big hit there. I don't see the HE shell hit there. Sometimes when you back up replays, it goofs it up. In any event, artillery will shred this tank. Be very careful with that, as careful as you can. The skill I was talking about earlier is the sound detection. Maybe if I had that, I might have had a little better ability. First of all, I didn't know it was coming. Maybe I could have made a jink, right? Or slam the brakes on a backup, or do something other than continue forward and go right where the potentially the guy had been aiming. Although with the vagaries of dispersion circles with artillery, sometimes you actually see the thing coming and you're moving into where it's going. I don't know how that works actually with that skill. I'm assuming the sound detection is precise on where that shell's going, but remember it's kind of a wide thing right there and you sort of got to guesstimate. But that being said, maybe that skill is something for me to think about. I have poo-pooed it in the past, more or less feeling like when I use it I can't really do anything with that, but maybe it's the fast tanks that are able to use that even better. All right, let's check another example. We lost that game, by the way. I was able to decap a couple times, but the T-92 had a considerable number of hit points, and he showed up during a clip reload. He shot me once, already splashed me, I think, something to that effect, and out of the game. Gave it the old college try. Here we are on El Haluf Dorf, and this is the 10th battle, right? We've done almost nothing, and I haven't uncorked my great game yet. This is it. This is it. So we changed our game plan a little bit, as opposed to try to get down maybe into the middle down here and spot, say, from this promontory, or expose myself or get tricky down here in the middle. I'm actually going to do some spotting, post up here, but be more defensive about it. I'm going to be looking for an opportunity to get out there, get the clip into people, and I'm going to get into the most obvious bush known to man. This bush always makes me nervous, especially when there is an FV 215B 183 on the other side. So I want to take peeks. I'll expose myself to potential blind shots a little bit to see if I can see anything. I don't want anybody to sneak up underneath us. I'm also noticing that the entire team went one direction, which is fine. It's great, especially if the enemy team doesn't push. If the enemy team is camping, I don't know why our 430U is there, but he is. If the enemy team is camping, then we're in good shape here. So 5 or 6 push me, could be a problem, but we're going to pay attention and see if we can't keep these guys from sneaking up underneath us. And it's the first game really where I played this carefully. You might argue it's a little too careful, but look, there's people shooting into the bush. See where the dust all flying around, you heard the boom. Take a peek here, we'll move out. In fact, they will shoot into this bush several times. There's the crater right there behind me. That's actually good because they're seeing, hopefully, it hit behind me and then going, oh, there's nobody in there. And then this squall, oh, not really great gunnery right there. See the bloom increase? Let it decrease? Pretty quick. Just terrible. Maybe that's another one of my problems. I don't know. Old age, the palsy, something. Not really aiming very well. Not really aiming very well. Our team starts to win handily up in the northwest. I'm looking at how many guys are spotted. We're only missing a Malshan, a Gonk, a Charioteer, and a Prague, and a T-103. Only. So there's 5 tanks potentially camping the ridge or somewhere else in the game. And now I'm going to go ahead and get on my horse. We have fewer guns on the enemy team, starting to create an advantage, and I catch the Prague, and the Prague's coming down. My luck. I start moving when he exposes himself. That's fine. We'll head down here. We got him late. He didn't see us. There you go. This is kind of a poor man's Prague anyway, but we're going to outspot him very nicely. So I'll wait for him to come up here. I'm going to try to shoot this guy. Long burst, and he's turned around. Get another hit into him. Hit C. Let's just start running. Oh, he's coming around here. Surely he can't hit me. Quit calling me Shirley. Yep, there's 1 and 2. But we didn't take any damage from the second one. Very glad one of the TDs on the enemy team wasn't peeking over the edge, but they're all busy, aren't they? But it's a complete romple stomp, right? I told you it was a mediocre game. It didn't have a whole lot to do with me. Just wanted to show you a game of me being a little more careful. So we'll bail out of this, try to get away from the Prague. I'd like to get back around there and start shooting him, but I don't want to just walk into his 3 shells. This may not actually be, in fact, be my 2,000 damage game, because I'm not sure how I get to 2,000 from where I am. We'll see. We'll see what happens here. I don't know. Maybe it's a 600 damage game. Swing back around. See, decent mobility, as you can see. Iron Arnie finds this guy. 103 dies. Yeah, this is not a 2,000 damage game. There's not even 2,000 damage left on the board. I'm not even sure where that deck game is, to be honest. Okay, we shoot him several times. Is he still there? No, he's moving. Oh boy. Now we're on a reload. Don't get... Did you see him shoot me? That was fantastic. I don't know where my 2,000 damage game is, to be honest, because that was not it. 471 damage, 146 assists on a Romple Stump. You can learn a lot from this game, fellas. Learn a lot, all right? Wanted to show you this just to show you that eventually I can also learn, potentially. There were obvious possibilities for me to get more aggressive in this game earlier, but this is what you want to do in terms of at least maintaining some of your hit points to get towards the end of the game. All right, let's wrap this thing up. Well, alrighty then. Let's wrap this thing up. What do we have here in the Squall? I think this is a tank with a really high upside if you're skilled and you play it correctly. Or play it correctly. Even if you're an average player, I think you can get those really amazing games with this tank. It will frustrate you if you're not careful with it. That's the problem with it. All of the light skin tanks in this game will frustrate you if you're not careful with them. It's just the way the game is played and the way the maps are. On a lot of maps, there's not a lot of flexibility on places you can go and ways you can avoid being seen based on channelized maps, etc. Any of the forward punchy face maps are going to be very difficult with this. Howsoever, if as the enemy team's guns start to get deleted and you have opportunities to come out and absolutely just waylay people with the gun, it can be extremely powerful, especially late game, because late game light tanks then get to leverage their moving camo. That's the biggest advantage that they've got. Generally size, that's not a big deal here because it's kind of a big one, but the moving camo, when there's less vision saturation on a map, is massively good for light tanks on late game situations with less enemies running around. Then you can start spotting people, jump out of places, show up places they're not expecting, all that good stuff. I was looking at the stats over here, a couple of other things. It is doing about as well. Let's see. Bring this back up real quick because there are a couple tanks I wanted to talk about here. So the Blesk is all the way down here at the bottom, not doing well at all. Played quite a bit right now because it is one of the new lines. If we sort by the battles, it's even 90, which is no surprise. You can't swing a dead cat without hitting an even 90. Blesk 66,000 and the Squall at 55 because the Squall is brand new. So look at how, wow, a lot of people got Squalls, so it's being played a lot. But we go back once again. I saw a couple videos earlier where the Squall was sitting in the 50s for the win rate, just based on, I think, the leftover of a lot of the CCs playing it real early on the stats, and it's already dropped down to 49.83 win rate. So it's in free fall at the moment, and the player win rate is still relatively high because usually the early adopters and people buying a bunch of boxes are decent players generally. But that minus 2.3, that's pretty rough. That's pretty rough. If we sort it by the Czech tanks and we get rid of the tier, we are seeing a sort of an issue here, to be honest. I mean, the Squall is the top dog at the moment. Then the Skoda, which surprises me, to be honest. I think the Skoda is way better. It only has a minus 0.06 win rate differential. I think the Skoda is an absolute beast. And to be honest, if I approached these other tanks like I approached the Skoda T17, I'd probably be doing a bit better in them. Because the Skoda, I don't have any problem going, this is just a medium with some capabilities on the stealth side, as opposed to going, this is a light tank with some capabilities on the medium side. It's a subtle difference, but I think it's important to mindset and your game plan when you go in and play the tank. So that's something I need to think about. And then the rest of them, they're just wow. Well, who cares about the lower tiers? But the Tessac 46.5, the Selma 47.12. That's tough, guys. Minus 4.7. These two are in the ballpark. Minus 1.43 and 156 is not that surprising for higher-ish tiers, especially at tier 9. That's not that surprising. But overall, it's just a line. Wargaming wants the lines to play the same, all through the line. Well, it does. Congratulations, Wargaming. You did it. Yay. All right. hopefully I've been rather upbeat while warning you about the downsides of this. Some of you will go, whatever, Guido, I play really well in it. That's good. I'm glad you've got the right mindset. You're playing it correctly. I wanted to warn others, maybe so they could avoid some of the pitfalls that I ran into. And when I say warn, I'm not saying warn as in don't play it or don't like it. I think it actually has a really high upside. But there's definitely some things you got to be careful with. Moving forward, we're going to continue with the field mod research stuff. I'm going to get the second setup, so I'm going to have a combat setup. I might switch the optics out for vents and see what that does for me. Maybe that's kind of the jack of all trades thing. I need to up some of the other skills around it, not worry too much about the vision. I'll still run the CVS. I think the CVS is mandatory. It's just too powerful to leave behind unless you're going pure combat setup for Himmelsdorf or something like that. Then yeah, feel free to toss that thing in the optics and the LNES and all that stuff. There you go, guys. I hope that helped. Tried to be reasoned and reasonable about it. I could have come in there and told you it was a terrible tank because I did poorly at it, but that would not be the truth. But it is a tank you got to be careful with. Be careful out there, guys. That's all I've got. Have a great one. We will see you.